All right, let's go to cell differentiation. So things that nucleus is nucleus, but things like the plasma membrane, the endoplasmic reticulum, and also things like the actual cytoplasm and the mitochondria, those have special names in the muscle cells. And again, so if you see those terms on the exam or in your future studies, don't get freaked out. It's just saying it's a special term for these organelles or parts of a cell in a muscle cell. All right, so remember things like we have talked about cell differentiation, how cells mature. You go from a stem cell, you go from to a stem cell to a more younger cell, immature form, and then you finally have a differentiated form. That's kind of like the final form of a cell. So with osteocytes, remember, or actually let's ask the chat. So what does osteo refer to, this part? When you see a term that has osteo, what is it referring to? Great. So a lot of you said bones. So again, yeah, osteo and site. So these are a type of bone cells. There are slight differences. Remember osteoblast class sites and osteogenic cells. But yes, I'm glad to see it. So if any of you get this wrong, I'm going to be very disappointed. But it looks like you're on the right track. And then you have the immature form, so osteoblasts. So again, osteocytes. These are the ones that are completely surrounded by matrix, and they're kind of just maintaining the surrounding matrix. Osteoblasts, these are the ones that are building new osteoid to build new bone matrix. Then you have chondrocytes. So chondro, what does that mean? Yeah, if osteo is bone, chondro is cartilage, right? And what's the immature form of a chondrocyte? It would be a chondroblast. Yeah, and someone already said cartilage. You're ahead of things. So then you have lymphocytes, and we didn't cover lymphocytes yet. So lymphocytes, what would be the immature form of that? It would be a lymphoblast. Fibrocytes, remember these are the ones that secrete a lot of that collagen and extracellular matrix. So what's an immature fibrocyte? That most abundant cell and connective tissue we call fibroblasts. Now let's finally get to Top Hat. So let's boot up Top Hat real quick. All right, so let's start the question. So with that logic, what is the immature or precursor form of a myocyte? Okay, let's see how everyone did. So most of you said myoblast, and most of you are correct. So again, myoblast, myoblast. So again, when you have a blast form and a site form, and they start with the same thing, the blast one is a younger, more immature version. The site version is a mature, differentiated form. Okay, so then that's good. So, oh yeah, this is a young. So I mean, actually, face-wise, he still looks the same, but the Rock used to look like this, right? But now we typically know he looks like this. So the thing is like, how do you go from? I mean, he's still built here, but now he's fully stacked and yoked in this one. So how does one go from that, like younger Rock to Rock, or Rock the Rock as we know him right now? So the thing is that myosatellite cells, like things like, okay, there are other things besides a bunch of deadlifts and yeah, PEDs. Some people are saying you have lots of protein, but what actually happens at the small level. Things that remember, all muscle organs are made out of muscle fascicles and they're made out of muscle cells. So how do you build up these muscle cells? Ooh, and actually someone said micro tear, so I'm going to talk about that real quick. So now we're talking about myosatellite cells. Think about myosatellite cells, they're kind of like, I'm hesitant to say stem cells. Well, actually, they kind of are stem cells because they do fit the two definitions we talked about, or the two criteria we talked about with stem cells. One, they can regenerate and undergo mitosis to generate more myosatellite cells. And two, they can differentiate. They can become fully more specialized version of other cells. So what we have here are myosatellite cells. So myosatellite cells can generate more myosatellite cells, can generate more myosatellite cells. But the thing is that they can also fuse together, but they can also differentiate into things called myoblasts. Now, when you have all these myoblasts and they can fuse together, then you have these myoblasts now forming a myocyte, aka muscle fiber. But these myosatellite cells, they're still, this is why they're kind of like satellites. They're kind of like still around in the environment. They're around, just like that we have satellites in surrounding our Earth and orbiting around our Earth. Our satellite cells are kind of like on the periphery, on the outside, in waiting. But the thing is that they don't actively divide as much as other cells. So when they're kind of waiting this in the state of waiting, if you go back to the chapter 3 lessons, we talk about when cells exit the cell cycle at mitosis and they enter something called quiescence. This is what they're typically at when they're in this kind of resting state. Muscle fibers are intact. So the thing is that myoblasts actually form to fuse to form myofibers. Again, myocytes, skeletal muscle fibers, same thing. So myoblasts, these are the young form, and then they form those myofibers. And things this is why mature skeletal myocytes are multinucleated, because each of these nuclei was originally an individual myoblast. So as these myoblasts fuse together, they don't get rid of their nuclei. These nuclei become part of the new muscle fiber. So that's why skeletal muscle fibers, once in a while in humans, you do see a maybe like 2 nuclei in a cardiac muscle cell, but skeletal muscle fibers, these definitely have multiple nuclei. And the thing is that these myoblasts or actually myosatellite cells, these are important for repairing muscles, and I think that's what someone was getting to in the chat. So again, you have all these myosatellite cells. They can become myoblasts. So again, they are kind of like the stem cells of skeletal muscle tissue. So sometimes they're also called just satellite cells. Sometimes they don't even say myosatellite, depending on their textbook, source, or article. So again, they are kind of stem cells because they can undergo mitosis and divide and create more of themselves, but they can also differentiate. So when they become myoblasts, that's differentiation. And then these myoblasts can fuse to form one muscle fiber. Again, each of these nuclei was originally one myoblast. And then you have all these nuclei. This is why skeletal muscle fibers are multinucleated. Now we're talking about these microtears. So again, what's happening here? We have this epimysium surrounding each muscle fiber, but sometimes due to mechanical stress or trauma to a muscle fiber, these cause these little tears, and you might hear of this term microtears. Well, does this stay damaged? It could stay damaged, but if you don't tear it or if you don't do enough trauma to a muscle fiber where it can't repair itself in time, but say it's only like you're doing a hard workout, you didn't strain anything, you didn't tear any muscles, what happens is if there's any damage to the muscle fiber, then these myosatellite cells can be activated. So they can come in, they can differentiate into myoblasts, and when they can fuse with the damaged muscle fiber, but the thing is that when they fuse, not only do they add their nuclei, they also add their proteins and their cytoplasm. So what happens when you have you have all this huge volume inside of an original muscle fiber. But if you keep on adding myosatellite cells and myoblasts, and if it keeps on fusing with the original fiber, well, what happens if you add a little more cytoplasm and sarcoplasm every time? Well, you're going to have the addition of volume and volume and volume of all the previous myosatellite cells that become myoblasts that fuse with the muscle fiber. So with all the cytoplasm of these cells joining the original muscle fiber, this muscle fiber grows bigger. So again, this is what happens at the cellular level. How you get the activation of the myosatellite cells. Actually, this is an active area of research, these myosatellite cells, because again, a lot of people want to get like The Rock as athletes or just bodybuilders. So this is why satellite cells are a hot topic, and microtears. It all has, regardless of how big you get, if you want to grow your muscles, this has to happen to some extent. These muscle fibers have to grow. How do they grow? Well, again, if you add the cytoplasm or sarcoplasm from cytoplasm into muscle cells, sarcoplasm, same thing. Yeah, so again, it's like adding the volume of all these cells together. But again, I showed those satellite cells disappearing, but that's the cool thing about these myosatellite cells. They can regenerate.